Death didn't feel like I imagined. It wasn't darkness or screaming or panic. It was silence, an eerie, sacred silence that wrapped itself around me like a soft, invisible veil. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, October 3rd, 2022. I had stayed home from work that day, some kind of flu, I thought. I'm a high school English teacher and we always push through everything. But by mid-morning, the aching in my chest turned sharp, and before I could call my husband Daniel, everything blurred. I remember collapsing near the kitchen sink and hearing the sound of glass breaking as my mug hit the floor. The next thing I knew, I wasn't in my body anymore. There was no pain, no fear, just awareness. I was floating, or maybe standing. I couldn't tell. I was somewhere between here and there, a space that felt weightless and endless. And then came the light. It didn't shine toward me, it opened around me. Not a flash, not a tunnel, but a presence. Gentle, powerful, alive. And in the center of it was a man I didn't need introduced. Jesus. He didn't look like a painting or a statue. He looked real. His face held deep peace, but also something deeper, sorrow and strength in equal measure. I didn't speak, but somehow he heard everything in my heart. He called me by name. Grace. My knees buckled. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming love in his voice. I had believed in him my whole life, or at least said I did. I went to church, I prayed, I taught my daughters to love him. But in that moment, standing before him, I realized how much of my belief had been hollow, convenient. I'm sorry, I whispered, though my lips didn't move. He nodded, not with disappointment but with understanding. You have always belonged to me, he said, but you have been asleep. Then he turned and the space around us changed. Suddenly, I was standing above the earth, as if looking through a clear veil wrapped around the planet. Cities, oceans, forests, it was all there, vivid and alive. But something stirred beneath the beauty. Something wrong. I will show you what is coming, Jesus said. And then you will return. Return? I didn't want to return. I had never felt such peace, such belonging. But I stayed silent. I knew something holy was about to be revealed. And then came the first vision. Below us, I saw war explosions flashing across the map like thunderclaps in the night. Cities I couldn't name crumbled to dust. Soldiers marched, bombs fell, and the cries of children echoed louder than the weapons. I saw chaos, desperation, and nations unraveling into rage. This is the first shaking, Jesus said. Peace will be taken from the earth. It has already begun. I wanted to look away. I wanted to cry out. But he gently placed his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Why? I asked, not in accusation but in heartbreak. Because they have built their peace on pride and politics, he answered, not on truth. As I watched, I saw leaders blaming each other, alliances fracturing, families torn apart by war, not just across oceans but across dinner tables. Civil wars, civil unrest. Divided homes, divided hearts. Then Jesus turned to me again, his eyes fierce yet tender. Tell them I am coming. Tell them the shaking is not my wrath, it is my mercy. I am calling the world to awaken before it is too late. And suddenly, the war faded from view, but the weight of what I had seen remained in my soul like fire. That was only the beginning. When the vision of war faded, I barely had time to catch my breath, if breath was even what I had there. My spirit still felt full of sorrow, yet somehow steadied by the presence of Jesus beside me. But what came next pierced even deeper. The earth below shifted. The noise of battle gave way to something quieter, something far more unsettling. Streets grew still. Lights flickered. Banks, stores, and businesses once filled with people now sat abandoned, their doors shut tight like tombs. I saw the economy collapse. It started like a ripple, then a flood. I watched as currency symbols across the world blinked out. The dollar, the euro, the yen gone. Screens in trading centers went black. Financial institutions fell like dominoes. I saw a man in a suit screaming into a dead phone, and a young mother crying because her debit card no longer worked and she couldn't buy formula. This is the second shaking, Jesus said beside me. The idols of wealth will fall. I felt a chill run through my soul. I had never considered myself obsessed with money, but I remembered the hours I had spent fretting over bills, savings, retirement. I remembered the way I sometimes measured security not by faith but by digits in an account. I wasn't greedy. But I had trusted the system. And that system was crumbling before my eyes. Why would you allow this? I asked him, though deep down I already sensed the answer. He looked at me with love that both comforted and convicted. Because they have built their lives on sand. And I am calling them to the rock. As he spoke, I saw more images: corporate executives filing into soup kitchens, stock traders wandering city streets, families huddled in candlelight because the power was gone. But something unexpected emerged from the ashes. People praying. Not in churches necessarily, but in kitchens, in basements, in parks. They gathered in circles, holding hands, weeping, reading tattered Bibles. They sang softly, not for performance but for presence. They weren't asking for wealth to return, they were asking for wisdom. They had been shaken awake. These are my remnant, Jesus said. The ones who will not bow to the God of gold. In them I will plant the seeds of revival. Then he showed me something that will stay with me forever. A father once wealthy, now living in a small trailer, kneeling with his 2 children in prayer. He had lost his business, his home, his car, but he had found his soul. His voice cracked as he thanked God not for the loss but for the clarity. It took losing everything, the man whispered, for me to finally see you. And I broke. Tears I didn't even know I had began pouring out of me. This wasn't punishment. It was mercy wearing the mask of crisis. It was God removing every false foundation so we would finally reach for what was real. Jesus touched my hand gently. They are not alone, he said. Those who walk with me will shine like fire in the night. But the world will try to extinguish that fire. A warning. A promise. Both wrapped into one. Then, as the vision began to dissolve, I felt something settle deep into my spirit, a sense of urgency, but also readiness. I now knew what this was. A divine wake-up call, meant to strip away illusions and ignite repentance. But it wasn't over. Jesus turned to me once more. His face now carrying a look I hadn't seen yet, one of grief deeper than any war or famine could cause. There is one more shaking, he said. And it is the most dangerous of all. The third vision came not with thunder but with a whisper. Jesus and I stood in silence. The earth below us shifted once again, but this time, there were no falling bombs or crashing banks, just a strange, eerie calm. People smiled, laughed, went about their lives as if everything were normal. But the air around them was wrong. Like a pleasant dream hiding a nightmare underneath. This, Jesus said softly, is the final shaking. At first I didn't see it. Everything looked fine. People packed churches. Religious influencers filled my view, some with millions of followers. Music, lights, sermons. But something felt hollow. I looked closer. There was no power behind their words. No conviction. Only applause. They use my name, Jesus said, but I am not in their mouths or in their hearts. Suddenly I saw behind the curtain. Pastors twisting scripture into self-help slogans. Churches more concerned with acceptance than truth. I saw altars replaced by stages. The cross replaced with branding. I saw people chasing experiences, not holiness. And worse, I saw people loving it. They no longer endure sound teaching, he said. They gather what tickles their ears and comforts their rebellion. It was everywhere. I saw false prophets rise, charismatic, attractive, influential. They promised prosperity, freedom, and a version of Jesus who demanded nothing. People swallowed the lies with smiles. But then Jesus showed me what I hadn't seen before. Chains. Invisible chains wrapped around necks, wrists, even children's minds. People who thought they were free were actually enslaved. And those preaching the lies? They didn't even know they were bound too. They are blind guides, Jesus said. And many will follow them, into darkness. The vision grew more painful. I saw classrooms teaching children that truth is relative, that identity, morality, and even reality are fluid and self-defined. I saw media glorifying what once would have made us weep. I saw parents afraid to speak truth for fear of being labeled. I saw Christians silent out of shame and compromise. They will call good evil and evil good, he said. And few will recognize it. Even the churches were divided. Some stood firm, small, quiet, unwavering. Others blended into the world so much they no longer looked like the church at all. And then I saw something that broke my spirit. A group of teenagers confused, isolated, scrolling endlessly on their phones. They weren't just being entertained, they were being discipled by algorithms, by influencers, by ideologies masked in kindness but rooted in rebellion. They were being led away from Jesus, and didn't even know it. They are the battleground, Jesus said, because the enemy knows the next generation determines the future. I fell to my knees if that's what it was. I felt crushed under the weight of what I had seen, not because of the evil but because of how ordinary it looked. How seductive. How subtle. This is the most dangerous shaking, Jesus continued, because it is not physical, it is spiritual. And if the heart is not grounded in me, it will fall. Then I saw something small but radiant. A woman in her living room reading the Bible aloud to her children. A young man fasting and praying alone in his room. A pastor refusing to dilute the gospel even though half his church had left. These were the lights in the darkness. These are my faithful ones, he said. They will not be many, but they will be mighty. And then, the vision ended. We stood again in the realm of peace. I could still feel the weight of everything I'd seen. But it wasn't fear that filled me now. It was clarity. Grace, Jesus said, looking straight into my soul. I am coming not in wrath but in mercy. Not to crush but to call. He paused. But time is short. Tell them. Warn them. Love them. And wake them. And just like that, everything faded. I opened my eyes to fluorescent light and the steady beep of a heart monitor. Voices echoed around me, rushed, panicked, relieved. A nurse called for a doctor. Someone touched my wrist. Another voice whispered, "She's back, she's breathing." But all I could think about was him. Jesus. The weight of what I had seen in his presence was still inside me, more real than the hospital bed I lay in. I didn't just have a near-death experience, I had been sent back. I had seen what's coming, and I had been given a mission. Daniel was the first person I saw clearly when I turned my head. His eyes were red. His hand trembled as he reached for mine. "You scared me half to death," he choked out with a laugh that cracked in the middle. I tried to speak but my throat burned. I simply squeezed his hand and blinked through tears. They said I had been unconscious for nearly 10 minutes. My heart had stopped. They couldn't explain how I came back so suddenly, so completely. But I knew. Jesus had sent me. The following weeks were a blur of recovery, doctors, tests, rest. But inside I was changing. I couldn't look at a phone screen, a news report, or even my daughters without feeling it. Urgency. Purpose. Clarity. The world I had known before was gone, and I had returned to one teetering on the edge of spiritual disaster and divine opportunity. I started small. I wrote in a journal every day everything I had seen, everything Jesus told me. I shared pieces with Daniel, who wept when I described the war, the collapse, the deception. Then I shared with a few close friends. Some listened, some didn't. Then I shared at church. I wasn't looking for a spotlight. I didn't want to be the woman who died and saw Jesus. I wanted to be faithful. I wanted to warn the ones I loved. I wanted to awaken the people who, like me, had believed but were asleep. And little by little people began to respond. I led a women's Bible group, not a big one, but full of hungry hearts. We didn't just talk about God's love. We talked about holiness, about surrender, about preparing for what's coming, not with fear but with faith. We prayed. We fasted. We cried. We worshipped not to feel good but to draw near. And as time passed, I started receiving messages, people saying, "I had a dream like that too. I feel something is coming. Thank you for saying what I couldn't put into words." They didn't need to die to hear God. They just needed someone to shake them awake. That's what I do now. Every day I wake up with a mission. I live for the next soul I might reach, the next child I might protect, the next lie I might expose, not with arguments but with light. Love. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm not a prophet. I'm not special. I'm just a woman who was given a second chance. A woman who saw what Jesus sees, and couldn't come back the same. If you're reading this, watching this, or listening somehow, then maybe you're being called too. Maybe you've felt it, the shaking, the shifting, The sense that the world isn't what it used to be. That's not just politics, or technology, or coincidence. It's the Spirit of God stirring the earth one last time. Don't wait for war. Don't wait for collapse. Don't wait for deception to wrap itself around your children. Wake up. He is calling you now gently but firmly. Not with wrath but with love. Just like he called me.